Hello, and welcome back to the Nourisher Podcast. Today's episode is going to be a very special one. It is a day where we are reaching outside of our region, the Texas Panhandle, to hear someone else's perspective. Sometimes I think it's very valuable to hear from someone who comes from a different culture, a different community, and a different mindset, or even just someone who's dealt with something very near and dear to your heart, to really digest what they say, to open our minds and give us a new perspective, a fresh perspective, if you will. And I'm just so happy that people from all over the country and the state of Texas are wanting to be included in the Nourisher Podcast and give their piece of advice, share their personal stories in hopes that maybe it helps you or someone that you know along the way. So I would encourage you today to share this episode with a friend, a family member, or anyone else that you may know that needs to get out of a dangerous situation or just needs that extra emotional support. I love that we are growing this community. I love that we're trying to empower women and build up the strength in one another. And so today's episode is absolutely no different. Obviously, we're talking about an abusive relationship, domestic violence. This conversation I know is very difficult and can be triggering for some listeners. Please take care of yourself as you listen and feel free to pause or step away at any time. But when you're ready, we will be here and we're ready to support you. Angeline, welcome to the Nourisher Podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Kayla. Thank you so much for having me as a special guest on your show.
Angeline, where are you from or where do you currently reside?
Okay, I currently reside in Stuart, Florida, but I'm originally from Saratoga Springs, New York.
Okay, I can hear a little bit of New York, so that makes sense. But Florida is much warmer, I guess,
yeah,
year-round.
It's a lot warmer down here now. So this is actually my first winter here in Florida. Absolutely loved it. We did have some cool days, but overall, it's been beautiful.
Well, I am really excited to have you on today to talk about a really sensitive and important topic amongst women. And so I want to start out by just getting to know a little bit more about how you got into this work and maybe why you're so passionate about it.
Yes, and thank you so much. The reason why I'm so passionate about this subject is because domestic violence is a silent epidemic, meaning people don't talk about it. There's a lot of people who are afraid to share their real life stories of claiming victory from domestic violence. So I claimed victory from domestic violence. And I used to be married to whom I thought was going to be the love of my life. Back in 1988, I was in my 20s, lived on a 38-foot Carver Mariner yacht. I worked in his business and brought six-figure income in. And you would think that we were the Hollywood couple, but that was not the case behind closed doors. There was physical abuse. There was verbal abuse, financial abuse that happened later on. So before the marriage, he wore the mask. And then slowly after that, the mask came off and he showed his true colors. I felt trapped at the time. I lost my sense of self-worth, and in 2008 the stock market crashed, so we lost over $100,000 in savings in mutual funds. And then I started to work in corporate America to make a name for myself and to rediscover my identity, because I felt like I was losing myself because of the things that he did to me. He threw me against the wall one night in December of 1999, and I broke my nose, was in the hospital, and 2 days later I had reconstructive nose surgery. And it was really, really bad. And people ask, well, why didn't you leave? It's because that we, as women, feel ashamed. And that was me. I felt ashamed. And I did not have a backup plan in place at the time. I thought, like many women do, we're nurturers and we try to work things out. And I was always the one who wanted to work things out. and I thought that he was going to change. I discovered eventually that that was not the case. He was not willing to change. He had gone for counseling. I went for counseling. We did it separately. And we tried marriage counseling. That didn't work because it was just a rehash of the past. And, it just wasn't working. And I knew it was not going to work. So after we lost money in the stock market and mutual funds, which is over $100,000, he decided while I was working in corporate America, I was making a name for myself, but behind my back, he was writing out balance transfer checks against my credit to purchase mutual funds. So in 2010, I found myself in $50,000 in debt.
Oh my gosh.
And I had lost my job because I allowed him to sabotage it, and I thought that I was doing the right thing by, staying with him, but no, that did not work out. That did not work out, and I woke up with an epiphany, and I stood in my truth, and I surrendered, and I realized that I was not going to live this life anymore, be in this toxic marriage of 23 years. So I drove to my attorney's office and wrote out a check for $5,000 to start divorce proceedings. And that was a pivoting moment for me emotionally, because I said, you know what? I can stand up on my own 2 feet. I can go out by myself. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself during that time. And I had, at the same time, I had an action plan in place. So I had an order of protection against him. And I was basically living the gypsy life for 1 year, traveling to different, to friends' houses, sleeping in their houses, sleeping in motel rooms. And it was just, I did it, but it was very hard. I was able to make that transition. And then that's when I got involved in the online space on Facebook, because I was afraid, to share my story. And I just wanted to put myself out there. I got involved with a health and wellness company that changed my life. And 1 year later, the divorce became final, and I felt liberated. And I moved from New York City to Saratoga Springs, New York, where I lived there for 16 years, but that move changed my life. And I knew that I could live on my own and stand on my own 2 feet. And eventually, I was able to pay that debt off, the $50,000 in debt. And I know, for women, that's a big struggle, the financial struggle. And they're afraid to leave because of financial reasons. Mm-hmm. And, some of them are moms with children. And, when the children are involved, then that's when it gets really uncomfortable.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and thank you for sharing your story, because I know you help other women heal, so it might be a little bit easier to tell now that you're far removed from it, but I just appreciate you willing to open up about that, because I know someone listening right now has gone through a similar experience, are going through a similar experience, and just to know they're not alone and that it is possible to get on the other side. I'm so grateful for your ability to share that.
Thank you. Yes, anything is possible, and I was able to get to the other side because of faith and belief in myself. And that's really important, because a lot of women struggle with that, reclaiming their faith. I leaned on God. I leaned on the Holy Spirit. I was reading Bible verses. I was going to church, and I was just praying, but also putting in the work as well. So I hired a mentor, and my mentor changed my life in 2018 when I went live in March and shared my story from the phone on Facebook, looking at the camera shaking. I'm crying in the beginning, but guess what? That was a breakthrough, and it was 7 million views. By the time when I woke up the next day, I was like, what just happened here?
Wow.
That's 7 million people who were impacted by my story, because it was not easy to share that piece. So it takes a lot of faith and belief in yourself. and personal development and investing in yourself. And there are resources for women who have gone through domestic violence. I remember that I would go to the public library because at that time I had no computer. I had no laptop. I just had my phone and that was it. But I would go to the public library and do research. Boy, and I realized, I'm so happy that I got out.
Yeah. Well, and when you were telling your story, a question popped up for me that you said you had a plan of action. Did you do that basically on your own, or do you feel like you had a support system at that time, or did you almost feel as if any support system you had outside of your husband at the time stripped away from you?
That's a good question. I did have support from my family, from my parents who are watching me in heaven now doing this broadcast. I had support of some family members. The biggest support was from the New York State Police and the Sheriff's Office in Dutchess County, New York, where I used to live. I had the protective order in place, and I will never forget what they told me. They said, if you rescind the protective order, we're not going to be able to help you. Because a lot of women get talked into, everything's going to be fine. And then 2 weeks later, something erupts, an incident happens, and you have no protective order, they're not going to come and help you. Mm-hmm. So it's important to have a plan in place. I worked with my attorney and the officials. I had a caseworker who worked with me for 1 year, to help me through the transition. So when I would go out, or let's say I was staying at a friend's house, I would let the authorities know, just in case he was, following me. I recall that he had hired a private investigator to literally stalk me. So I was on eggshells.
Of course.
Yeah.
People who abuse other people are very good at manipulation.
Yes.
And so the fact that you can think about someone being able to hire a private investigator to stalk the person they're abusing, that investigator might not have any idea, but it makes you wonder, did they know? Did they know what they were doing and enabling?
Exactly. You wonder about that. Like, wait a minute, it should be the other way around. But no, I didn't do that. I made a plan to leave, and I was traveling to Saratoga looking for a one-bedroom apartment, and eventually I found a one-bedroom apartment. And then I moved out. I had a plan in place. I had movers there. I had a witness there, and they helped me through the transition. I took some old furniture with me, and then eventually I bought new furniture. But other than that, I had some money put aside. So let's say you're working, or let's say you have some savings, make sure you put it away in a separate name, separate account. But basically, I wasn't working either because I was just not able to do it. I was not able to go back to work again, not until about a year later. So I took that time to nourish myself, learn about myself. Self-love is so important, to love on yourself. Take yourself out to a coffee shop, to a restaurant, to the library, go to a yoga class, go to a dance class. So I was doing all these things during my divorce, and I rediscovered who I was meant to be, and I knew that I could stand up on my own 2 feet.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Got my confidence back. It's been an amazing journey. And then 6 years ago, I started my podcast because I had the vision and the dream to help women reclaim their power and break free from those limiting beliefs, from those barriers, help them break down those barriers so they can live their happiest lives ever. And I'm very, very grateful I started the podcast. Initially, it was just a podcast to bring awareness and to share my story. But then I brought on other guests who shared their real life stories, just real women, real and raw conversations. And that's what it's all about, having a conversation. Because like I said, this, domestic violence is taboo. It's a silent epidemic. And to this day, I know that there are more people, women, who are coming out and sharing their stories. It takes courage to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and then you and I were talking before we started recording that I had reached out to my followers and listeners and just asked for maybe some of their questions that they had. And just to see people be vulnerable enough to submit a question is huge. And I sent them a message and I said, thank you so much for submitting your question, because that takes strength. And so it kind of amazed me that people that I interact with every day, or people that I met 2 years ago, were willing to share their experience and ask questions. And so I know there's so much power in that, but it takes a lot of vulnerability to open up and receive help, 1, 2, to speak out about it, and then 3, to do something about it.
Exactly. And there was a lady, she's been following me for years, and she shared part of her story a few days ago. Like, she finally opened up and shared her story. People are just coming out of the woodwork and they're sharing their story because now they feel empowered, moving from a place of scarcity to abundance. Because once you surrender, that's the first step, is to own up to it and say, look, I'm claiming victory now, because now I know that I can live free from my abuser. But there's power when you go live. You just feel that sense of strength and vulnerability. And there is power in sharing your story. And you could rewrite your story. You have the power to rewrite your story and claim victory.
I love that you are able to mentor women who maybe are on the brink of victory, right? Or the brink of starting a new life. But just to kind of jump into some of the questions that I received that I would love to get your feedback on. This first question, it applies to that mindset after the fact, right? So this person for years has been asking themselves, why did I stay so long? What are your initial thoughts about that statement? And maybe how does the psychological manipulation play a role in maybe keeping women trapped in abusive relationships even after they've walked away?
That's a good question. Yes, there is manipulation involved. For me, I didn't leave right away because I felt shame and guilt. And he was controlling, manipulative. Oh, he said things are going to get better and blah, 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 blah. And then 2 weeks later, something would happen. There was gaslighting involved, and there was just so many things involved. I thought that this was love. And my attorney brought to my attention later on that is toxic love. Mm-hmm. They want to keep you in that cocoon. I mean, for me, I focused on surrounding myself with people on a higher level and who supported me in my journey. And they were willing to mentor me because they believed in me. And a lot of time, it just takes faith and belief in yourself. And if I had to do it over again, which I don't want to, but looking back, I would have left a lot sooner. But it takes courage to do that. And I wasn't strong enough as a person to do that. And a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah, and you did touch a little bit on some of those external barriers as well, because you talked about the fear of financial struggle and whether or not they could afford to be on their own, or if they would have a home to go to, or if they would be able to keep their job going through all of this. And then that internal barrier would almost be, it's as if you're not you. And especially in your young 20s. I mean, you're not even the full you in your young 20s, regardless of what relationship you're in. So whenever you add in an abusive relationship on top of that, you have no idea who you are.
You don't know who you are. Oh my goodness. Tell me about it.
How can we offer grace and understanding to women who maybe are still in these situations, whether they are kind of in that denial stage or they're ready to make a move to get out?
Well, I had a coach who worked with me for 1 year. She had gone through domestic violence. But for women who feel stuck, like if you're feeling stuck, there are resources. You could go to the Domestic Violence Bureau, and they have programs for, we are all victors. I don't even say victim anymore.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are resources. In fact, one of my clients, she took it upon herself to go to her local domestic violence in Australia, and they had classes, free classes. So there are free resources. If you can't afford, to hire a coach or a mentor, there are resources in place. So you just have to Google it, use ChatGPT. You would be amazed at how much information that you could come up with. But I mean, for me, I hired a mentor. I did go to the local domestic violence bureau, had a meeting, and I had a caseworker, and there were some programs that I attended, and that changed my life. It took me years to find that courage, but the last 3 years of my marriage, I didn't leave right away because I was working on myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working behind the scenes. When I felt ready, I just did it.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone who maybe doesn't understand why women stay? Like, just for the average Joe on the street who hears someone's story and they say, well, why doesn't she just leave? What would you tell that person?
I would tell that person, to be honest, I would say show some compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Give that person some grace because she doesn't realize it's happening. You don't realize that it's actually happening to you until they basically beat you down to the ground. So what I always say is give that person grace, show compassion. Maybe I can help you. Maybe there's something that I can help you with.
I'm all about compassion, so I love that you said that. One thing that stuck out to me was that you said women don't even realize it's happening to them. So another listener question that we received was, what are some red flags or maybe subtle signs of psychological abuse that women tend to overlook?
So psychological abuse is, for example, you're not good enough. You're not a good wife. You're not a good mother. Everything that you do is wrong. I was told that many times. And I was the one handling the finances at the time, for my ex's business. So imagine him telling me, oh yeah, you bounce checks. You're not capable and you're never going to make it. You're going to end up with nothing. And, you can't. And eventually that gets in your mind. And then you feel that you can't do anything.
Right. And then you mentioned a lot about the gaslighting, that if you do have a moment of clarity where you think, I'm not in the wrong for this, and maybe you attempt to stand up for yourself, how they can turn that back around on you and make you think, no, yeah, it is my fault.
Exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about that isolation piece, like how maybe that starts and then what it looks like to the most intense degree?
Yes, so isolation from family. For example, for me, I was isolated from my own parents and my brother, and I was isolated from friends. It was only his friends that we could associate with, not my friends. Like, my friends were no good, which is totally wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example. It's
almost discrediting, let's just say it's your mom, right?
Right.
Discrediting your family and saying, your mom doesn't know what she's talking about.
Right, exactly.
Or your friends are dramatic, or they're annoying to be around. And so then slowly it's like you love this person and you want them to enjoy their time around whoever they're with, especially with you.
Sure.
And so, of course, you're willing to, cut back a little bit. But then pretty soon you look around and it's been 2 months since you've seen your family or your friends.
Exactly. And for me, it was way too long. And I can't change that. But I would keep in touch with my parents by phone. But that's not the same as being there.
Obviously, I think that asking for help is a huge step. Talking to someone, whether that's sharing your story with a friend or getting help from a mental health counselor, someone who can reassure you, right, that you're not crazy.
Exactly.
And that quote unquote gentle shove or moving you out of the way was not okay, and that it's a pattern.
It's a pattern. It's a pattern of abuse that is what they thrive on. They just don't want you to succeed. They don't want you to be independent. Like he didn't want me to go out and work in corporate America anymore. And I put my foot down and I said, no. I said, that's it. That's it.
We also want to touch on how that abuse follows us even after we've separated from them. So one of our listeners really kind of made a statement that post-separation abuse and the abuse cycle shifting versus ending completely. So what are some examples of maybe how that abuse, maybe it's your specific example of how your abuse continued after you left your home and maybe in the middle of your divorce? Like you weren't exactly with him every single day, but
No.
how did the abuse shift?
I remember that he would lock me out of the house and I would have to call the police because we were close to the divorce and we were like really, really close. And I had all my stuff packed upstairs because I had moved upstairs. We had a 2-story house and he would not let me in the house. So I decided to call the police. They ordered him to leave because they knew that I was moving out. So I actually had to go to a hotel down the road from me, and the owner kindly paid for my room for 3 nights. Like I said, I was off social media for a while because I had to be really, really careful. And then when I went back to the house for the last night, I literally didn't sleep because I was, concerned. But then when I woke up the next day and the movers came at 9 o'clock, and when I left, I handed the keys over to him, and that was it. Now, post-separation abuse, he only contacted me once about something, and I gave it to my lawyer. I said, I don't want to talk to you anymore. It was something about the car insurance. Something really small, but not a big deal. And, I said, well, I'll have my attorney take care of it, and I just hung up.
Yeah, and I'm sure it presents differently when you have kids, right? Because that's one, in a divorce situation, that adds a whole other layer to the craziness of divorce. But especially if you're leaving an abusive situation, I can only imagine how that is exacerbated when we're talking about post-separation abuse.
Yes, definitely. Now, I didn't have children, so the process was better. But I remember sitting in court one time, and there was a couple in front of us arguing back and forth. And I will never forget what the judge told them. He said, do not use your children as pawns. Mm-hmm. And I have a very good friend. She was in a domestic violence relationship, and she left that relationship with her son. She had to stay in a 1-bedroom apartment for a while outside of Chicago, and then she eventually moved and remarried again. But she now, with the co-parenting, you have to do it. You just have to put your personal feelings aside and just focus on what's best for your children. So she's been able to do that with him.
And like you said, kind of relying on your attorney and the professionals that are there to help you in the beginning, right. Relying more on them to communicate, your needs until things can get to a place of healthy co-parenting or a place of where there's no communication whatsoever. So I think that's a really great piece of advice because, a lot of us want to just respond. It's so hard not to respond to a text message when someone's calling you a pair. And you're like, I want to tell you all the things that I think about you and everything that you did wrong.
Don't engage in that. Forget that. Don't do it. Eventually they'll stop texting. They will stop. But if you keep feeding into it, then they're going to respond even more.
So on that note, and then specifically thinking about your friend you just talked about, how long do you feel like it takes to heal and trust again? Because she remarried. And so how long does it take to get to a spot mentally where you're not thinking every person you meet will be that abusive person again?
That's a good question. So the first thing that I did, and I'm sure my friend did, is learn to love yourself. Mm-hmm. Love yourself first. And how I was able to heal is by focusing on gratitude. Writing down at least 10 things that I'm grateful every single morning. And then in the evening, meditate and write 3 things that I'm grateful for, because it puts you in that state of gratitude. So focusing on gratitude. Journaling was a huge component, was huge for me. Also, self-affirmations. I am beautiful. I am worthy. I deserve to live the life I truly deserve to live. And that puts you in abundance instead of, so focus on what you are grateful for. The fact that you have a roof over your head, and you can drink coffee and you can drink tea and take a shower, that's something to be grateful for, because a lot of people don't have that. Mm-hmm. So put yourself in a state of gratitude. Surround yourself with people who believe in you, positive people. And actually, I'm glad you asked this question, because once you do that, you will start to attract the right people in your life. If you don't focus on that, all you're going to do is attract toxic people. So be careful who you surround yourself with. If it's your own family members who are toxic, then I would just stay away and focus on building friendships. Like focus on building yourself up first. Mm-hmm. So self-love is the best love. So work on yourself first, and then and it may take a year. I don't know, but my advice always is not to rush it. If it takes you a year, takes you 2 years. I'm single for 16 years because I know my worth.
I love that you connected the way you feel about yourself, the way you trust yourself attracts the right people. I think that's true in so many different scenarios. But for this, I think one really important tool to have for recovery is how to identify healthy relationships, moving forward. And it's easier to identify those relationships when that's all you're surrounded by. And so, of course, someone walks into your life and the second they treat you bad, or the second they treat you worse than a friend would treat you, then it's like, I don't have time for you.
Exactly.
I just wanted to give you kind of a second to give your message of hope, maybe a message of encouragement, words that you have for someone who's going through this currently, who recently got out of an abusive relationship. What is your message of hope?
My message of hope is to not give up on yourself. Do not give up. Stay the course. Have a plan in place. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. So my message to you is to rise up into the best version of yourself, because I know that I did. And if I can do it, you can do it. Make sure that you stay focused on an action plan. Number one, make sure that you stay focused. Like I said, there's light at the end of the tunnel. There is life after abuse. I know that for a fact. And you deserve to live an abundant life. No one can take that away from you.
And you mentioned earlier in our discussion, there was one resource that you mentioned, and I know we're in 2 different parts of the country, so I will go back and I'll add in some local resources that we have. But what are some places, maybe online or national organizations that you know about, where people can go to find help?
Okay, they can go to the National Domestic Violence Hotline.
And then obviously a place where they can find you, hear your story, and listen to your advice and maybe how to heal after leaving a very toxic situation.
I'm offering a free breakthrough call, 1-hour VIP breakthrough session. Because first I want to get to know you and what your situation is, and then plan that roadmap.
Oh, I love that. And where would they sign up for that?
Okay, they go to my website at letsbreakthesilence.com, and there will be a video on the homepage, and then it will say to book a call. There is a button there to book a call.
I love that, because I want everyone to be able to have that strength and hear it from someone who's been in their shoes. So thank you so much for what you do and for offering that to everyone.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. My pleasure. It's always a pleasure to help. We're here to empower.
Okay, Angeline. Well, I always wrap up the podcast by asking two important questions.
Oh, yes.
So, the first question is, what is something that not a lot of people may know about you?
Oh, that's a good question. I love to travel, and I took a trip to Port Elizabeth, South Africa 7 years ago to not only attend a live event, but I'm very adventurous, so we did the African safari. It was a lot of fun.
Ooh, that does sound fun. A lot of people auction those off at fundraisers here.
Oh, they do, yeah. But over there, you see the animals. You see the rhinoceros and the elephant, but far away because you're not allowed to leave the van.
I love that because I love animals from afar, especially ones that large.
Oh, yeah, and a lion, too. So, oh, yeah.
Exactly. My fiance loves to be outside. He loves nature, and he absolutely loves animals. So I think that's something we're going to have to put on our bucket list for sure.
Oh, put South Africa on your bucket list. You will really enjoy it.
Okay, well, the second question is, who are 3 women who inspire you?
Okay, Lisa Nichols. Okay, so Lisa overcame domestic violence, and she is a speaker and an author. So I listened to Lisa Nichols, and she talks about how to break barriers and, how she overcame domestic violence, and now she remarried again to the love of her life. But she has a story to tell. Talk about a story to tell. Mine is nothing in comparison to hers. But just, there's a lot of women who have broken the silence and who've shared their real life stories. But she is someone that you want to follow. Second one is Mel Robbins.
Yes, everyone loves Mel.
Yeah, and I just purchased her book, The Let Them Theory. So, in other words, for me, not only letting go, but if people talk about you, let them. Because we're not people pleasers. And I got out of that people pleasing.
I know, I always tell people I'm a recovering people pleaser.
There you go. Okay, well, probably me too. So, but learn to say no. And learn to seriously to stand in your truth. And I listen to her podcast every week, and her book is amazing. Let them gossip about you. I always add something else, forgive them too. But, let them.
I love the forgive them part. We should dive into that more on the let them and then forgive them.
Forgive them because it's just a reflection of their own shortcomings. Mm-hmm. Especially as you're elevating in life. For me, I've had to let go of a lot of people. My circle of friends has dramatically changed in the last 2 years, evolved. So we're always growing and evolving. So don't be surprised if some people that you thought were your supporters are not your supporters anymore. My third one would be Oprah Winfrey. I mean, she doesn't have her show anymore, but she's always about empowering women to live to their greatest potential. So she's all about that. And I'm all about that too.
Well, I know she doesn't have her show anymore, but if she did, I would guarantee that you'd be on it.
Oh, thank you. Maybe she'll reconsider and have her show back. I would love to be on that show.
Angeline, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and giving us a glimpse of what healing looks like. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the work you do so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me on your podcast show, Kayla. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Of course. And tell everyone where they can follow you or learn more about your work.
Okay, so they can learn about my work at letsbreakthesilence.com. And they can also find me on Facebook at Angeline Constantinou. I'll send you the link. But it's actually it's on my website. You can learn about my podcast there too. My podcast is on Spotify and Apple and all the live streaming platforms that you listen to. I also am doing speaking events. So if you are looking for a speaker, or if you know someone who is looking for a speaker, you can reach out to me or my PR agency, and they will take care of the rest.
If this episode spoke to you, we encourage you to share it with someone in your life, whether they're currently experiencing domestic violence or walking the path toward healing and recovery. You never know how much a conversation like this could mean to someone who absolutely needs it. Don't forget that you can get a full list of resources, details about our guests, and more information when you sign up for the newsletter at thenourisherpod.com. You just visit the website, scroll to the bottom where it says join the squad, and put your email in, and that's it. The newsletter is here to keep you informed, inspired, and most importantly, connected. I promise I won't blow up your email with a ton of spam. You just get an email every time a new episode drops to let you know what we're talking about, who we're interviewing, and how you can learn more about those guests. So until next time, stay strong, stay connected, and keep growing.